Now concerning the lunar cult, Pickett and Prince in their book Templar Revelation say that in the Synoptic Gospels, the woman who anoints Jesus is not named, although they make a point that she is a sinner. Mary of Bethany, who did the anointing, was known by the rabbis as Mary Lucifer, Mary the light bringer. So right there we've got a dichotomy. Yes, we know from the stories and the movies and whatnot, and from Sunday school and everything else, that this sinner, all the disciples hated her guts and didn't know why Jesus was hanging around with her. But then we have in the rabbi tradition, oh no, she's Lucifer, the lady light bringer. And then we do, even in the Bible, have her mysteriously initiating or anointing Jesus. So which is true? What is going on here? Well, what's going on here is revealed when we analyze the word sinner. Those who have looked at my Astro theology page on the website, who've checked into this, know that the word sinner doesn't mean anything negative at all. In this program we've been talking about how one cult supplanted the others, and one cult becomes the hegemony over another. Well, in that process, the previous cult, together with all of its customs, its traditions, and its belief systems, are considered or thought to be negative. All right? They're demonized by the next cult that comes into power or into ascendancy. The word sinner comes from the word sin, S-I-N, which was the earliest known name of the moon goddess. She was known as Min, and he was also in Babylon known as a male, Sin, S-I-N. So when you hear the prophets of old, and we hear them remonstrating and saying, get thee hence, go and sin no more, get this woman away, she's a sinner, it does not have anything to mean, it doesn't have anything to do with moral or karmic rectitude or imperfection. It simply means this is a female of the lunar cult. So when you hear them say, go and sin no more, all they're saying is, go and sin no more, don't go and worship sin anymore. Worship the sun, that's all holy, but don't be worshipping the moon. And if you do, you're a sinner. So Eric Newman, the German scholar, says that a favorite symbol of the matriarchal sphere is the moon in its relationship to the night and to the Great Mother, or the night sky, an expression of her essential spirit. As I said earlier, the lunar cult was symbolized by the scarabus beetle of Egypt and the unicorn, the white pale unicorn of the moon and the northerly sign of Cancer. The scarabus beetle motif comes from Khepra, the Egyptian god of the scarabus beetle, whose sign was when the sun passes to its highest point through Cancer up into Leo, its royal house. Khepra, the god of Egypt. All the lunar cult were distinguished because they'd wear the horns, the lunar horns. Same as the Native American Indians who count time by the many moons. Well, their shaman would wear the lunar horns. And we see Michelangelo, Moses, who, by the way, was the leader in ancient times of the lunar cult, is seen in the sculpture with the lunar horns. It's always perplexed art historians and the Christians. Why is Moses seen with the horns? What could it possibly mean? It means what Michelangelo, being a member of secret societies, understood. And that is that he is the king or the leader of the lunar cult. And he worshipped on Mount Sinai. Sinai was the mountain on which you worship the moon. And this, because of course you have to go high on the mountain to have your observatories and your shrines when you worship the constellations in the heavens. That's why mountains and hills were considered sacred. Moses means from the water. That's all it means. The priestess draws Moses from the water. Now Moses or Moses also meant the initiator, the one who initiated with water. On Islamic flags to this day we'll see the crescent moon. And even though as patriarchal and as fundamentalistic as they may be, their symbols show you where they originally came from. The star and the moon that's on their turrets and their minarets and on their symbols and their flags show you that they originated, like Christianity, from the stellar and the lunar cult. The symbol we use today for money, the so-called dollar bill sign, is a very, very ancient motif coming out from 10,000 years and before, from the time of Egypt. The god, as I said, the color of money was the three colors of the sun, the moon, and the earth. But silver is more predominant than gold. So most of the coins of the world were silver, and most of the money and the coins of the world were dedicated to the moon, because moon is silver, moon is white. And if they're dedicated to the moon, They're obviously dedicated to the goddess of the moon. And the most famous goddess of the moon was Isis. And if you shrink her name to the name of Isis, I-S-I-S, if you compact those together, you will get the American dollar sign. Money, M-O-N-E-Y, Mon, for the moon. The Virgin Mary is always described as having 12 stars in her hair, 12 stars around her head, crowned with 12 stars, and standing on the crescent moon. What could it possibly mean? The Statue of Liberty, the very symbol of America, is Egyptian, comes from Lady Semiramis, or also from Sechet, the Egyptian goddess. So the females of the lunar cult were once the keepers of the gnosis. They understood the mystery of the fauna and the flora, and they were the high initiators. Particularly coming down to us is the Holy Grail motif. The Holy Grail motif, which is picked up in the Christians with the Eucharist and the drinking of the wine, and here's the bread, which is my body, and the wine, which is my blood. But of course what we're not told is that bread is sacred to the female cult, because the 4 ingredients that come to make up bread, yeast, grain, water, and wheat, are all female earth symbols. And the blood of the red wine is very clearly the female menstrual blood. In the tarot we have the suit of cups and the ace of cups, all representing this motif of the chalice as being connected to knowledge. But as time passed and these cults supplant each other, the lunar cult and its representatives become demonic. As the elucidation says, that and the kingdom became dead and desert, for they lost the voices of the wells and of the damsels that were therein. In Divination and the Goddess, we talk very much in that program, in this series, about how women were the keepers of being, where men were more about the keepers of doing, and how women have lost that, which is partly why the world is in the state that it's in. And that in order to even be able to work in society and operate today, the females have to lose their femininity, just as men have lost it, and become more masculinized. And the consequences of that, for both the sexes and for the world. Now, as I said, the word mystery comes from the word for woman. It derives from mesta, and also from mass, M-A-S. So when you hear about the Christians holding their mass, it's an entirely female rite and ritual coming out of Egypt, the mass. It also gives the mess, M-E-S-S, is an Egyptian word, as in the Catholic Mass. It originally was the circular wafer representing the ovum. So when you see the priest putting that little round white wafer into the believer's mouth, that represents the wafer, which represents the female ovum. So that by you intaking it into your body, you will become feminized. He's already dressed in robes of a female, standing in Holy Mother Church with a chalice in one hand, offering you bread with the other. It's all a feminine matriarchal symbol coming from the lunar cult. The word secret comes from the word secretion, implying again the female mysteries, the biology of the female. When we are given a blessing, what we're not told is that comes from blodsen, which means in Teutonic, in Germanic, bleeding. Female again, feminine. Now the tears are oblique references to the divine menstruum. Okay, so the falling of tears of the Jew, and if you look at tarot card number 18, you'll see that the moon goddess is weeping tears. Isis, of course, wept tears for Osiris. Well, the tears are oblique references to the divine menstruum, called the Khu, K-H-U, by the Egyptians. It was the tears which Isis cried over her lost consort Osiris. In alchemical writings, this menstruum was known as the starfire, or even the wise blood. It also is the sang grail of the Arthurian legends, carried by 3 maidens. In the Orthodox canon, it appears obliquely as the red wine of the Christian Eucharist. We hear in the Bible that Mary Magdalene is the harlot, but what we don't read is that again is a mistranslation. The word harlot comes originally from Herodulai, but Herodulai means the sacred or beloved one. Ah, is that a change? Harlot comes from Herodulai, meaning she is the sacred one, the beloved one, my beloved one. Now Mary Magdalene, Magdala, in Aramaic means tower. Mary Magdalene is known as the Lady of the Tower. But who's the original lady of the tower? The original lady of the tower was Nephthys, the sister of Isis. If you look on any Egyptian papyri, you'll see Isis, the two females, the two mothers. Like I said earlier, that all those two Marys motifs comes from Isis and Nephthys, the twins. But you'll notice that Isis has her famous headdress, the seat, and beside her stands Nephthys, and her headdress was the tower. So thousands of years before, we have the story of Mary Magdalene, the Lady of Magdala, the tower. It's an old re-scripting of Isis and also of Nephthys, the Lady of the Tower. Egyptian. The wedding feast at Cana is the wedding feast of the serpent, of the stellar cult. And at that point, we understand that it's now coming to light through the release of the Gnostic Gospels and other deep researches that the marriage feast of Cana was the marriage of Jesus Christ to Mary Magdalene. And that's just as simple as that. The two were wed. These two individuals, it was covered up later, but the idea that even if they're biographical or they're fictional, the idea was that at Cana there was a coming together, a marriage. Now Leonard Shlain, in his book The Alphabet versus the Goddess, says that the Egyptians, Babylonians, Greeks and Romans had no word in their language for sin. The Israelites introduced both the word and the concept into the stream of Western civilization, and by so doing diverted it. One of the most important female goddess traditions, concepts, was Sophia, called the goddess of wisdom. The word Sophia means wisdom. And Caitlin Matthews lets us know how important Sophia was to the Christians. She says, "It was Rudolf Bultmann, was it not, the German biblical scholar, who cited certain passages in the Gospels as interpolations of Sophia herself, put into the mouth of Christ."